A young man who came to my masjid one time. I was the imam of a masjid, and he came to the masjid and for prayer. He was covered in tattoos, but I didn't pay no attention to that. He made wudu, prayed with us. And it was the first time I had ever seen him in the masjid, so my habit was when I saw somebody new, a new face, I would say salam, welcome them to the community, hoping they moved into the area, joined our congregation. And he ends up telling me his story. He says that, I grew up in a bad place with some really bad influences in the family and in the neighborhood. I ended up living a life of crime. Dropped out of high school, on the streets, drugs, gangs, violence. He says eventually I was arrested for, third felony, third crime, and 3 strikes, and that's it. You go to prison for life. He said I was 23 years old, and I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in prison. And he says I came from a Muslim family, a Muslim background, but I didn't know or remember much of my Islam. So as I was sitting there in the cell, the night before I was going to be presented before the judge who's going to hear my case, it just hit me that my life was over. My life was over. So he says, I didn't even remember how to pray. I didn't even know what to say. I just remembered the position of sujood. So I fell down into sujood and I cried. And I said, oh Allah, I'm sorry I messed up. Please give me another chance. And he says, I don't know, the only thing I could think of was something my mother used to tell me a lot when I was a kid. She always wanted me to memorize the Qur'an, be a hafiz. So I just said, oh Allah, I will change my life and I will memorize the Qur'an. So he says the next morning, I spent the whole night crying in sujood. Next morning I go in front of the judge. My mom's there in the back of the courtroom. The judge tells me to stand up, looks at my file, and he says, what if I dismissed your case right now? What would you go and do? Tell me. Because the judge said, I'm tired of locking away young people for the rest of their lives. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? And he said, it's funny you ask me that, because I repented last night. I made the decision to change my life last night. And I'm going to go and study my religion. I'm going to become a better person. So the judge said, case dismissed. Get out of here. Don't ever let me see you in my courtroom ever again. He says, I left from the courthouse. I didn't even go back home. I went straight to the masjid. I asked the imam at the masjid. I kept going until 2 days later, I ended up at a Qur'an memorization school. And I walked through the door, just jeans and a t-shirt, normal dude, but except covered in tattoos from my hands all the way up to my neck. I just walked through the door, and one of the teachers, one of the shuyukh, he saw me and, Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam, how can I help you? And I said, I want to memorize the Qur'an. And he said, come on in, let's sit down and talk. He said, I didn't even know how to read alif, ba, ta, tha at that day. 8 months later, I completed the memorization of the entire Qur'an. In 8 months, memorized the entire Qur'an. When I met this brother years after this incident, he was married, he was a father, he had beautiful children. I remember him coming to the masjid with his children. They had beautiful character, beautiful akhlaq. He used to teach them the Qur'an. And I remember asking him to lead the prayer for my jama'ah, my congregation. He recited the Qur'an beautifully. You never know where somebody's from. You never know where they're going.